Welcome back, my fellow adventurers and wayward souls. I've been giving Black Desert Online's current situation a considerable amount of thought, and I'd like your feedback on what I've come up with. If there's a good idea in here, I want you to tell me about it. And if there's a bad idea in there because I have a logic flaw that maybe I overlooked, I'd also like you to tell me about that. Now is the time to tell PA what we want. They've taken some considerable effort to finally take in player feedback. They've reached out to some of our top performers in specific classes to offer recommendations in order to rework those class balance changes while under an NDA. Also, they have flown partners out to the Pearl Abyss headquarters to meet with the new COO of Pearl Abyss North America. We also have an Afaro event that very closely reflects something that we have asked for on this channel before. Two things have to happen for this game's future and enduring success. The existing core problems that are buried within the game must be remedied, and the content that people have been asking for has to be delivered. If we deliver content before the core problems are resolved, players will consume that content or avoid it entirely and move right along. The order in which these ideas are implemented are paramount to the successful implementation of these ideas. This line of thought is more akin to a repair strategy for the current state of the game versus just an idea or two. As such, I'll discuss each idea in the order of their implementation. This is going to be a longer video, so buckle up, put on your thinking caps, and let's go for a ride. Let's begin with class protection. Pearl Abyss polled the entire BDO player base on one of three options. The players made their voices and desires known. They wanted to reduce the amount of protections and slow down the game's movement. Nothing to this effect happened. The endless amount of super armor protections that currently exist in the game should be shifted to more of a frontal guard meta, to allow for some form of skill and position-based gameplay. Heavily super armored and iframe based classes should be moved to frontal guards and super armors with maybe like a few super armors with maybe one iframe in between. Additionally, no skill should ever deal damage in an iframe. This means that Striker's 100% BSR attack should be changed. This also means that if Pearl Abyss feels that forcing the Striker to stand still for the duration of the animation is unfair, then either the animation should be sped up to match similar abilities from other classes or should be outright changed. This also means that abilities such as the Tamer's ability to stand still in an iframe should be completely removed. It should be switched from an iframe to either a super armor or a frontal guard. Skilled players of this game are well versed in the animation canceling required to move swiftly around and move smoothly through the game. Most players, however, are not, so the next thing they need to address is the combat speed. As a result of PA's newly released classes to make them feel more exciting for players to pick up and enjoy, the difference between these classes and their older class counterparts has sometimes become too detrimental to ignore. So what do? They sped up the old classes. Sometimes the speed up was adequate, other times it wasn't. The result of this constant game of catch-up has resulted in classes that were not originally designed to move at specific speeds having their movement shunted to match the ever-increasing speeds of these new classes. This has been severely exacerbated on some of this game's oldest and long-standing problems: desync. If Pearl Abyss cannot address desync on its own, they need to slow the game down, the game's combat down, and slow down the movement speed. This will allow the game to be more accessible to average players who do not have the visual acuity that some of our more skilled players possess. This also leads to the next issue: click to move. Click to move needs to be removed from combat entirely. Click to move in combat intentionally creates desync from the player executing. The player intentionally creating desync is perhaps one of the most awful and unfair mechanics that has ever been introduced into the game. The solution is simple. If your weapons are out, you should not be able to click to move, period. This includes that while you're on a horse or a boat or a mount or any other form of movement that isn't just you running around town. It's either that or remove click to move completely. Now let's talk the big one: gear progression. Undoubtedly, gear progression is a huge problem, especially after sovereign weapons were introduced, and even more so now with Karazad. Perlibis created this incredibly high bar with the Deberekas that required over 11,000 crons for a single pen tap. Let's do some simple math here. A premium outfit at full price costs around $35 and gives a less than 1,000 cron stones. I think the exact number is like 933. For the ease of understanding these numbers, we'll just round up to 1,000. This amount of crons, if purchased from a vendor, costs 3 billion silver. That means to even attempt a Debereka at pen, you were previously spending $385 US or 33 billion silver per attempt. These attempts still had a 40% chance to downgrade to try. This system, as it existed, was a complete disrespect to players' time and the value of their money. Perlibis made an effort to remedy this by introducing Kharazad accessories. The system of which Kharazad uses unlockable gems to emulate other pieces of equipment such as Kadri rings or Dawn earrings or Centaur belts is, in my opinion, very good. It reduces your inventory load while still giving those pieces of equipment value by allowing them to be converted into Kharazad. The issues that I and many other players have with Kharazad, however, is due to the sunk cost into accuracy or into Debereka equipment. I'll use myself as an example. I made 16 unsuccessful attempts on my Debereka belt to pen. Additionally, I sold accuracy equipment that I then purchased for 140 billion silver from the marketplace for around 30 to 40 billion silver apiece. All told, I have lost over 500 billions of silver over the past year and a half on BDO, and I have very little to show for it. It set me so far behind that I can't even secure a sovereign weapon for my awakening build as an awakened warrior. This was absolutely destructive to my motivation for playing this game, and I know that I'm not alone in this. While Kharazad was a step in the right direction by reducing the cron requirement per attempt, it does double the amount of required attempts, which doubles the potential failure points and doubles the stacks needed to be finished with the item. There's also the sunk cost for people in the transition point of having a dozen or so Debereka failures that now need to decide whether they want to switch over to Kharazad or not. This problem is further exacerbated by the most core problem facing this game: Cron stones, or as I've come to dub them, clown stones. Clown stones can be acquired one of two ways. The first way is by buying costumes and melting them, and the second way is by purchasing them off a vendor. There needs to be more ways to acquire Cron stones if the status quo is to continue. By offering meaningful Cron stone acquisition in-game, you encourage players to be active in your game. This creates a second-order effect where it creates the likelihood, or increases, the likelihood that players will subscribe to one or all three of your subscription methods. This means offering them as meaningful rewards in the following ways. Within PvP content, allowing Cron stones to be acquired in exchange for AOS tokens. From AOS, a rate of 2 tokens for 1 Cron stones seems fair at the current rate of acquisition. That means on an Arena Solare win, a player can purchase 15 Cron stones, and on a loss, a player can purchase 6.5 Cron stones. This will roughly allow players to earn 150 million silver-ish worth of Crons per hour. This does have the potential for exploitation within practice modes. And if exploitation is detected, then PA must appropriately take action against exploiters. Perlibis needs to codify this in their terms of service in some way to ensure that it's not abused. Cron stones should also be acquired through red battlefield tokens. At the current rate of about 5 per victory and 3 per defeat, Cron stones should be exchangeable at the rate of 3 Cron stones for 1 token. This means on an RBF victory, a player can earn 15 Cron stones, and on a defeat they can earn 9. Lastly, you allow a Cron exchange for 1-to-1 with resplendent medals of honor from Node War content. By allowing these methods within PvP content, you are directly providing players a path to meaningful progression through PvP. This same concept of meaningful progression pathing can be applied to other aspects of the game that need attention. The current Afaro event should be a permanent addition to the game. It provides players who are grinding a way to get Crons in a fun RNG event. To balance this, the reward should be provided through Afaro surety seals, either reset monthly or should be adjusted to contain a flat number of Crons per surety, like maybe 1 Cron equals 1 surety. This way you're not getting an insane amount of Crons on an RNG spawn on a guarantee. To coincide with this, grinding on Arsha should effectively offer double the rate of an Afaru spawn, further encouraging players to play on the Arsha server. This will increase the PvP potential of these areas in the open world. Cron should also drop from world bosses and field bosses in meaningful quantities. A field boss should drop a amount of crons, say 15 to 20 crons, and then a world boss should drop an amount of crons, say between 20 and 30 crons. This will encourage players to come to every world boss and field boss, whether they've completed the weekly cap on a select boss or not. For example, like Garmoth or Land of the Morning Light 2 bosses have weekly caps. You're rewarding those players for actively being present and playing your game and participating in world boss content. It further alleviates to some degree the circumstances where players are fighting bosses later in the week towards the weekly reset that are dying much more slowly because people have already gotten their rewards earlier in the week. So those players aren't necessarily being punished, and there's an incentive for people to come back. Now that we've discussed Cronstones, it's time to discuss the enhancement system. The absolute #1 reason players quit Black Desert Online is the punishing enhancement system. BDO has made some great strides to make this better by giving you more fail stacks, adding in the Agris Hammer, which then guarantees your enhancement, and clarifying enhancement percentages. This, however, is not enough. Players do not wish to see their progress or efforts erased through failure. But some players genuinely enjoy their RNG elements of enhancement. As such, I've come up with a system or a solution that I feel could work. These solutions would exist in addition to the current method of using RNG enhancement taps, or Cronstone protections. This way, the option isn't being taken from you, but rather what I'm recommending is an additional option available to you. I'm going to present two solutions. Solution 1. Allow a high number of Cronstones to guarantee the enhancement. For example, if an item requires 1,000 Cronstones to enhance, you can put 15,000 Cronstones, or 15 times the quantity of Cronstones, into that item to guarantee the enhancement. The player would inject these Cronstones for guaranteed enhancements attempts into their gear or equipment, similar to how Kaphras work right now. This creates a situation where the player has to choose between the RNG of tapping or using those same Cronstones to guarantee the enhancement. The player would have to determine which is more beneficial to their needs, and with the existence of the Agris Hammer, they will eventually hit a failsafe that is more expensive than the guaranteed method, but they could have gotten at any point through their RNG. The downside to this is it would create a hard price point for players if they choose to whale, even if that price point is expensive. This brings me to solution number 2. You create a new form of Kaphras Stone, one that is a new item that cannot be traded on the marketplace. This rewards players for activity and provides absolutely no pay-to-win remedy or reward for gear progression outside of the existing Cronstone system. For the sake of this discussion, let's call them Runestones. Runestones would be acquired through the exact same means as the Cronstone method suggested earlier in this video, and be acquired in addition to Cronstones and not in replacement of them. This would allow players using currency to choose which item they require. So if you are perhaps using a seal, a red battlefield seal, you can either pick Runestones or Cronstones, but if you go to a world boss, you'll get both. This would also allow Pluribus to develop new grind spots with Runestones as the primary item on the drop table, like perhaps in the Demon Land. It would also allow them to use the Decia 2 Lantern to offer this drop in addition to the normal drop table. The amount of Runestones required to guarantee an item enhancement would be 10 times the amount of Cronstones per enhancement level. Runestones can also be offered by Pluribus as event rewards, incentives for tournaments, partner or creator events, login rewards, coupons, and any number of randomized incentive rewards that PA wishes to provide players. For example, daily quests. The downside to this is that it would require some considerable effort from Pluribus to implement, but in my opinion, this is the superior solution. Both of these solutions would provide players a form of guaranteed progression, which would greatly ease the pain of some people experienced through the current system. their time and effort would feel rewarding and respected. The option to use the current system as is would persist, so there would be no loss to those who enjoy that system as it is now. Next, let's talk about what is, to many of us, perhaps the most important part of this video: declarations of war, or GVGs. The current system for GVGs works like this. An officer of one guild sends a declaration of war that must be accepted by the GM of another guild. If the GM declines, that's the end of it and no one hears about it. If the GM accepts, a declaration of war begins. After 1 hour, any officer from either guild can choose to remove the deck on their end, and that ends the declaration of war completely. The way this is used is usually one of these 3 ways. I know X person is grinding in Y location. They're a GM. My friends and I are going to spam them with guild declarations until they accept so that we can grief their grind. Afterward, I'll drop the guild deck so they can't retaliate. Or, reason 2, I declare war because I'm grinding in a spot and your member is in my spot. Your GM is not online or does not wish to bother with the event, so he declines the war. Or, I declare war on your guild because I don't like your face. Your GM accepts because he doesn't like that I don't like your face. An officer from either of those guilds is later attacked at a grind spot. That officer doesn't care about how much anyone likes anyone else's face, so he drops the deck so he can grind in peace. Those are the current 3 conditions of GVGs as they are right now. Guild versus guild are a motivator for players. It's what enables player-driven content to flourish and creates strife and challenge between players in a ever-persisting world. Prolibus will not return declarations of war to the state they were in previously. So, I'm presenting a hybrid solution. My recommendation is not perfect, but it's better than what we have currently. My recommendation is simply this. Any officer and above from your guild can declare war. Any staff, advisor, or GM from the receiving guild can accept that war. If the war is declined, nothing happens. If they accept, then the declaration of war begins, and both sides can see the score. If one side decides they no longer wish to be at war, any staff, advisor, or GM from either guild can cancel the war deck. However, the declaration of war does not end until both guilds cancel the war deck. If both guilds cancel the war, a game-wide announcement similar to the current Guild War announcement system goes out that says, Guild A has agreed to peace with Guild B. Additionally, if one guild cancels a declaration and the other does not, then the war will continue for 1 month or 1,000 kills, and then it will cancel automatically. Once 1,000 kills are achieved, the war is over, or again, that 1 month timer elapses. If the timer expires or one guild achieves 1,000 kills over deaths, a game-wide announcement proclaiming Guild A has defeated Guild B in a declaration of war. This, I feel, is the best overall solution I can think of that provides a middle ground to each camp of the GVG conundrum. It also gives you a little bit of bragging rights when your guild can clearly say they defeated another guild in a war. If you can think of a better system or perhaps a way to improve this idea, please let me know in the comments. My last comment on the PvP front is this. If you heal another player or you buff a player that is in combat, you must be flagged. If you're level 49, you should not be able to stand in a party of level 60 players, healing that party with impunity. If you heal or buff someone who is in combat with a player, you should also be flagged for combat, period. This applies to GVGs, Arsha, and all forms of open world combat. Next, the game needs to rework Shais. Shai is the only class that allows you to play a purely support role in Black Desert Online. In my opinion, this is a valid form of gameplay. Some people just want to play Holy Priests in World of Warcraft or White Mages in Final Fantasy XIV. In Black Desert Online, Shai is the closest we have to those classes. The problem is that in the current state of the game, Shais are also incredibly overtuned to be an indestructible buff machine in PvP that provides overpowering buffs that are almost a necessity in group combat. In PvE, they're also so overwhelmingly powerful that in the endgame group grind spots, they're practically a necessity for optimal performance. This is a terrible design. and a lot of power to give to a very small fraction of the player base. I've come up with a solution that does not completely disenfranchise Shai players. It will allow them to continue to play support roles, but with a more balanced function. I spoke to Choice on this one extensively, and he offered some recommendations as well. We'll start with what he recommended. Misty Haze should not affect PvE mobs at all. No one else can match this sort of functionality, and it is far too strong to remain as it is. Additionally, the Shai speed spell should be altered to be effective only to the Shai, or perhaps it offers a different utility that strictly affects the Shai's healing output or some other effect. As for my recommendation, Shai buffs should be affected by your AP bracket. At the highest bracket, the Shai buff's effectiveness functions exactly as it does currently, but at the lowest brackets, the AP buffs are completely ineffective. In PvP, this resolves the issue of the immortal Shai/DP evasion Shais ruining what would otherwise be very competitive and fun combat. In PvE, this encourages Shais to build AP and affect their grind and their partners positively. It would also allow them to tag other classes without detrimentally affecting their ability to grind. Additionally, when a Shai is slain, the buffs that the Shai provides should be removed from the players possessing them. If you kill a Shai right now and you're affected by Misty Haze falls off. It should work the exact same way with the Shai if they buff you. Shais as we know them currently should become the succession build. An awakening build for Shais featuring perhaps a slingshot as a weapon should be introduced, making them a mid to long range CC class with a good amount of super armor. Support classes are fun, but playing as what appears to be a little girl should not be the only way you are able to do this. For many players who want to enjoy that playstyle, the aesthetic is so unappealing that they just won't play the game. As such, in order to fix both this problem and draw players back into the game in one fell swoop, a class should be introduced that mirrors the capabilities of the Shai 1-to-1. This class should be an adult human male called the Paladin, with a heavy armored aesthetic, featuring upper armor and long combat coats, long armored skirts and tassets. The Paladin would use a one-handed hammer similar to Thor's hammer from the famous Marvel franchise, sharing weapon slots with the Scholar. In its offhand, it should carry a Libre or a book, sharing slots with the Wusa. In its succession form, the class will function identically to the Shai. In its awakening form, it would wield an oversized warhammer, and it would function similar to the Shai as a mid-range CC class, but instead of having a long-range CC class capabilities, they would also be short-range CC class capabilities, with large sweeping hammer attacks with good super armor. Canonically, Paladins would have been tied to the Demon Land, or they could be tied to the Demon Land, I should say, containing the demon incursion and protecting the world in secrecy. As the demonic forces' powers have grown, their numbers have dwindled and must now somehow teach their ways to adventurers and help them repel the contain the demonic horde. I'm not a role player. I don't know what Perlibus could write. I'm just throwing ideas out there to maybe help them along. This brings us to, once again, how you draw players, both new and returning players, back to your game. Wusa and Megu were your first twin classes. Similarly, they launched Guardian and its opposing force, the Dracania. Thinking about our Paladin, you drop two classes together. The Paladin and his nemesis, the Necromancer. The Necromancer being the fundamental opposite of the Paladin. A malevolent force seeking to aid forces of darkness in corrupting the world of Black Desert Online. Later, you introduce the Gunner class. People have been demanding it. Give it to them. Succession as a dual pistol wielder, and the Awakening form as a long rifle. I can talk about these ideas for these latter two classes all night, but if you want to hear that, just turn up to one of my streams and I'll be happy to drown you in my thoughts. Once you've done these three things, you can introduce the Demon Land and a massive ad campaign everywhere. I'm talking about YouTube ads, Twitch ads, and invite game reviewers from big outlets to preview your changes and write articles on how your game has changed. This is my strategy to Perlibus. This isn't all-inclusive. The game needs a lot of love, such as more meaningful grind spots for groups. Guys, please provide me your input or anything on anything you've heard in this video in the comments below. If you like what you've heard, show PA by voting with the like button. As with some of my previous videos, I will forward this to Prolibus to make sure that it is seen and heard by as many of our fellow creators, partners, GMs, and CMs as possible. Please, put your comments in there. Make your voices heard. As always, thank you guys for joining me today. I'll see you guys on my next adventure.